more like an entourage. People just go to the house, and the community sees these sirens and cars going into the house, and people, in the Rambo style, people just get down, all suited up, and go into this house. It's clear that somebody in that house is probably tested positive. That contributes to what Dr. Kaba was talking about. So we're talking about stigma, but we're also forgetting that the process also contributes to the stigma that we are complaining about.
No, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with Dr. Kaba more. I think there are 4 or 5 lessons that we can learn from our fight against HIV and other diseases. One of them is the multisectorality of the response. If your response is overwhelmingly health-centric, then you tend to lose out on the other sectors. The second one is to fight stigma and discrimination, as we talked about, and I'll come back to that. The third one is to have a data-driven response. So like Dr. Kaba said, data is very important because it tells you what the trends are.
How well have we done in that regard?
I think I'm not too sure that we have used the data as well as we should, because I think we've focused on the raw numbers. The raw numbers are good, but the trends are more important, because it's the trends that tell you whether you're going up, you're going down. Recently the word peaking has become au fait. Everybody's talking about it.
We're going to get there. We'll get there so that, we'll probably clear the confusion in the minds of the viewers, whether we have picked or otherwise. And let's all go to bed with some understanding.
And then the last one is looking at the human rights aspects of this response. But coming to your particular question about stigma and discrimination, I think Amma would probably be better suited to respond to that. But without actually addressing that, we're not going to go anywhere. Absolutely. And how do we address that? We address that by what, and I like the new term that Dr. Kaba used about community ownership. And you see, we can learn best examples or best practice from other parts of the world. Because if the disease, and I'll tell you why it's important for us to do it here in Ghana. Because we cannot learn lock, stock, and barrel everything that people are doing from other places. In other places, they have more robust health systems. They have facilities, they can keep people there. And then they have, older populations and so on. So very quickly, people who are suffering from COVID, you can tell them apart from people who are not suffering. You take them to the health facilities. In Ghana and in Africa, most of our cases, as Amma said, are asymptomatic, so they are walking around. Yeah. You saw what happened with the lockdown. We are not in the position to throw a social safety net, to provide food and so on to people in the community. So what we really should be doing is to be doing the testing, tracing, isolating, and treating. And how do we do that? We have to involve the communities. And once the communities are part of it, when people know, those who have suffered the disease, know that it's not something that, overwhelmingly people come out of it, then it switches from being their disease and it becomes something that we together should take care of. Then the stigma can come down. It's very important. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere.
But how about instances where, communities have resisted facilities that have been proposed as isolation centers? And we've seen some in the Greater Accra, in the central region. And then recently, we're also talking about the same in Obuasi as well, where the community felt like, look, this facility, we don't need it to be used as an isolation center. So we want the communities to own this, but how do we go about having them accept that responsibility?
So we need to get the people on board. It's about education. So let me go back to the market women. A colleague of mine went to the market and the women were not wearing masks. And she had a picture of how someone can transmit the disease. You have someone wearing a mask. What happens to nobody wearing a mask? The whole gamut when both parties are wearing a mask. And the moment she showed it to this group of market women, they all went back and put on their mask. So they had the mask, but they were not wearing it. But they saw a picture that shows that if someone coughs without a mask, this amount is
happens.
transmitted. If someone has a mask and coughs, it reduces it. If you have a mask, what you get is different from if you don't. That picture was worth 1,000 words. So we say we're doing a lot of education or a lot of communication. Communication is not just saying, I can say Teshekrede to Victor or to him or to anybody. If you don't understand what Teshekrede means, it's a meaningless. Do you understand? But I'm saying thank you in Turkish. So it's about how are we communicating? Do they understand it? Because there are factors that drive stigma. We know it. Fear is one. The number one thing. We are afraid. We think that you are marked. If you come near us, we will get that mark too. So we do everything in our power to keep you away. If you don't address that fear, you're not going to get anywhere. A lot of information out there. We have an infodemic. We accept it. But people think that either this whole thing is a hoax or it's because there's some people have conspired, it's a biological. There's so many things that people look at as the cause. What I tell people is whether it's a biological weapon, whether it's this, whether it's that, it is here. What can we do to manage it? So what we are saying is, yes, the disease is there. You can get it. You can prevent it. And even when you get it, A, B, C, and D. So I explained to you about the origin, about the disease. I let you know that this is not anything to be ashamed of. Nobody went anywhere and said, COVID, come and infect me because I want to go and spread it among my community. So someone has it, you treat them with kindness, you treat them with care. Let them know the majority of people who have it in this country don't show any symptoms, but they can infect it. And if it happened to them, how would you want to be treated? When they get to know that this thing can happen to me, it changes the attitude. But when you see it as they, and in Ghana, it started with as a bourgeoisie disease, as an elitist disease. It's only people who are the privilege of traveling who were getting it. But now Kaya Yesa are getting it and dying. Now we get people from all walks of life. It's in our communities. The very dense ones. So it has changed. It means that the ordinary person can also be affected. So the ground is ripe for that communication because earlier on, it was like, no matter what you talk, this thing made me too crying. I haven't been outside. I'm not going to get it. That was the response.
You've painted the dangerous picture so clearly. One thing I wanted to do is, so that when I'm saying with you, just run through maybe 3 or 4 simple steps of how we can deal with stigma. Because the danger is, there's somebody who might be watching right now who may have it, but because of stigma, they don't want to even show up and may indirectly, unfortunately, be also spreading the virus in the community. So how do we deal with stigma?
Unfortunately, that is already happening. So the first thing is that understanding should be there that it is not your fault that you got the disease. I'll start by saying that if someone is stigmatizing you or discriminating against it, it is their issue. It gets you, but the part that gets to you is because of their reaction. Right. The social stigma is one, but the self-stigma is even a bigger issue. So in dealing with it, we need to understand that it is not your fault that you had the disease. It's an infection, you got it. It's not the end of the world. You can deal with it. So you need to separate your person from the disease.
Right.
And that's why the language we use is important. A person who has contracted COVID-19 as opposed to COVID-19 case. A person who may be infected with COVID-19 as opposed to a suspected COVID-19 case. The way we use suspect in the moment you hear suspect, red alert. What you are communicating is that, yes. So what you are communicating is that this person may have it, he may or she may be exposed. So let's change the language. A person who may have it rather than person, suspect or COVID-19 suspect or case.
It's a struggle. It's that you want to cough, even it's a problem because you just bury your cough and run.
Because the moment you cough, the reaction of the people around you itself creates impression. So that language is different. We need to separate the person from the disease. So how you deal with it is important. This disease, yes, there are ways of spreading, and that is why we are saying everybody should mask up, including you. You are not masked up, but the four of us.
All masked up. I'm protected.
So should I start covering?
No, I'm protected.
So this one is important, but more importantly is let's see that these people are our families, they are friends. You can be talking to someone, maybe before yesterday, before the person had the result, you had even spoken to the person. The moment you get to know that the person is positive, no, it's the same person. This is the time the person needs support. So rather than avoid, yes, we're talking about physical distance and social distance, but this is the time to show love. This is the time to show acceptance. This is the time to support the person, whatever they can do to help. One person sharing her experience about how her friends actually supported her when she ended up testing positive, including coming to leave food behind her door because they knew she couldn't go out to the market to go and buy food and come and eat. So they leave. These are signs of love. These are the things that will encourage people, knowing that if you go out, that support, it's available. And when the people come to our facilities, with regarding everything that we do, the psychological aspect is also so important, and that is why there are psychologists in all the major facilities. Certainly all the treatment centers have it, and I know that most of our big health facilities, regional and teaching hospital, all have psychologists. These people need to be part of the treatment team if they are not, because they have a unique role. They will tell you, anybody who works, one doctor was telling me that if he talks to all the patients who have gone through GAIS, one of the differentiating factor was the role of the psychologist, because they prepare you. Because in going home, if I'm dealing with patients, I'll tell them that you are happy. Sometimes you go home and you think that your family will be happy, your friends will be happy, you've recovered, you've come home. But they may not see it that way. They may still avoid you. If they avoid you and treat you that way, it is not okay, but understand them. Don't take it personal. They are afraid. They should know that you are the person they should be least afraid of. In fact, that's the whole idea. The person who has been diagnosed will be either isolated at home or will be in a facility. And per our discharge criteria, you would test negative. So these are the people we can actually go and hug, if anything, because they are not going to infect you. The person you are talking to may have the disease, but it may be so mild, or they are not showing any symptoms. You think that they are okay. So the people we are actually stigmatizing and avoiding are the ones we are safest with. Because if they've gone through it now, they know their status. They've had it, they've recovered.
They are fine.
They're fine.
Doc, I want to get into the information and education bit, because Dr. Edwin made the point that we appear to be giving a lot more information and less of education. How do we balance the two to make sure that, yes, we're informing, but as really the most important element of education is also not lost out?
I think it goes back to what Dr. Kaba said about getting into the minds of the people we are trying to reach. I find, all of us on this stage are highly educated. You say COVID, we probably know more about COVID than the average person. Yeah. And so the type of education, the type of information, when I turn on the TV and I'm looking for information about the outbreak, there are certain things that I take for granted because I know them already. Right. And so when they come and talk about a peak or no peak, or they talk about case numbers, I'm able to put it in a certain context because I have a framework of knowledge that I'm building on top of. But if I am trying to explain the disease to someone else who perhaps doesn't have the same background as I do, doesn't have the same level of exposure or education as I do, I need to not take my knowledge for granted. I need to put myself in their minds and try to explain it to them the way, if I didn't have my background knowledge, I would need it to be explained. Right. So I think the issue we have in Ghana is, obviously we have a very diverse population socioeconomically. We have a diverse population educationally. Mm-hmm. And I think the challenge we currently have is, on the one hand, you want to provide information that is not redundant or boring to people who already know it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you want to provide information that is helpful to those who don't know it. And striking that balance is quite challenging. We may be guilty perhaps of over intellectualizing the problem. Everybody has become an expert on infectious disease over the last. So in fact, sometimes the most educated people are the ones who are the most troublesome, because they are the ones who believe all these conspiracy theories on WhatsApp. I mean, I have friends who are always texting me, "Oh, we heard from this or that, wearing a mask." The latest one was wearing a mask could make you, pass out because you don't have good oxygen to your brain. I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So it's not just, I think we should not think it's just people who are perhaps less educated. Sometimes the most educated people know the least about the disease because they think they know. Sometimes there's the thing worse than being ignorant is being ignorant and thinking that you actually know something. So I think what we need to do is perhaps begin to think of multiple strategies.
Right.
Doc was talking about the pictorial, the image to the market ladies about the spread. That is I've seen a number of those videos. You can actually have where you have powder that looks like the virus and it shows how it spreads. There are graphic images that we could use on media such as TV and others to really communicate clearly why we are saying people should wear masks.
And you see, you have the resistance from the market women being prominent, because of the excuse of I don't feel comfortable wearing the mask, and also we knew about these things. And so let me go back to what Dr. Paul was talking about earlier. I'll stay with you, Dr. Bediako. We knew about the dynamics of our population, and we decided that we would exempt that section from the lockdown. We didn't proceed that with education. We have them still go to the market. Over the 3-week lockdown period, they were still in the market. Afterwards, there hasn't been any conscious effort targeted at the market women to educate them. And I stay with them because of what's happening in Obuasi. The Obuasi case is my reference point. I mean, we know what's happening there, but as we speak, there's clearly no strategy to communicate to the market women across the country about this.
I think, let's also be realistic and know that we are learning as we go. We've never really had a situation quite like this in Ghana. Of course, we had the Ebola scare. We have had other smaller outbreaks. But this is, no one in the world has seen this before. This is, So there are a lot of areas we can learn. I think in addition to trying to solve the problems we have, we should be using these as learning moments so that we are better prepared for any eventuality going forward. It is more likely that, given the way the world works right now, events like this are more likely to happen now than they were maybe 20, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I agree with you entirely. We should be, I think maybe we should be moving into the phase where we begin targeted, community-driven sort of awareness campaigns where we don't talk at people. We talk at people a lot. A case in my own home, we have a nanny who looks after, I have a young baby, we have a nanny. And when Corona first broke out, we tried to tell her about it. And she was kind of, dismissive. Oh, Corona won't get me. God will protect me. It's not my problem. And my wife and I are both scientists. And we were struck like, we are telling you that this is a problem. And you are telling me that it's not, media, it won't affect me.
Absolutely.
But so what my wife did was 900 people have died in Italy. 1,000 people have died in America. My wife did not say anything more. And a couple days later, the nanny came and said, hey, this Corona thing is scary. So just by allowing her to see what is happening, this same virus, and I've been part of a group that sequenced the virus, it's the same virus we have here, is killing hundreds of thousands of people. The moment people finally begin to grasp that, something clicks and they're like, you know what, I need to begin to take this seriously for myself.
You see, and that strategy is communicating through, for lack of a better expression, fear, so they get the message. But we don't want to spread fear. We're spreading calm. And so this strategy may not work. If we want to go on that path.
I think we have to have a balanced approach. I think you have to have a healthy respect, not fear, but a healthy respect for the virus. And the reason we respect it is because, let's face it, it can kill you. But then you are not afraid to the point that you are stigmatizing somebody who has it. So you are informing people that there are precautions. If you wash your hands, you use alcohol-based hand sanitizers, you wear a mask, you significantly reduce the risk to yourself and to those around you. And I think if we begin to do that, because you drive around Accra and it feels, partly because we had to lift the lockdown, it was a false sense of, oh, well, the lockdown was here for the virus, we lifted the lockdown, everything must be fine. Even though the president repeatedly said, we are releasing, we are lifting lockdown, but the other measures are in place. It doesn't seem to click. So I think what we need to do is begin to try to help people to, like Dr. Kaba said, think, put ourselves in their shoes, and then help people to take ownership for their communities. It's not, maybe we are making it a Ghana problem. Maybe we should make it in your household, in your association of market women, in your trotro, whatever it is, in your tiny little sphere where you have influence. Take ownership of that situation. So if I'm driving a trotro, I take ownership that in my trotro, before you get in, you sanitize. Everybody's going to wear a mask. Not because the government has said so, but because in my little area, this is something that I can take control of. If I'm a market woman in my stall, I can tell the other market ladies, I don't want to mess around with corona, please wear a mask. If we begin to do that for ourselves, not because the government says so or because even CNN or TV3 says so, because for myself and for the people around me, I think that will begin to build some momentum.
That individual responsibility is what Dr. Bediako has been talking about. You're so live here on the Roundtable conversation on 60 days of COVID-19 in Ghana, where we were, where we are, and the measures we could put in place to prevent where we don't want to be in the coming days. We'll be back shortly after this quick break, and we'll get into the bit on enforcement, because yes, the president has said it, but clearly adherence is an issue. We'll get into that, and then also get into how the science should be leading some of the decisions that we take, because data is available. We'll be back shortly. Stay with us.
Eveduko because Badona Metro Povito fed or Pega a Kelege. Ukonye DSP Anastasia Anani, I Kenya Nest. Legi Bebe Yauma. I apopo gan never do the Hekia Megodo. Ovadumi on Hagbo. A Kenya Dolele or your coronavirus. Atameka here Bemia got dogo. And then Nanaka here Benawole Bomewa, Mega dogo. Amesia mena no papa me be mi atachi dolele ya nu le yi pe re megbe be na mi akata mi apeji agaje me.
I will kindly urge us all to comply to the precautionary measures about this COVID-19 pandemic. First of all, I would like us all to wash our hands frequently with soap and running water. Stay away from crowded places, and also keep your distance of about 2 meters away from each other. Make sure you eat healthy and then protect yourself. Stay calm and keep protected, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Thank you.
Yeah, Tamalika Wula, Mane Ibia Itizo Iyanga, Optional King, winner of TV3 Mentor Reloaded. And Tapo Hambia Peti, the coronavirus, Kambakuba Nanzang, Bilim Hankal in Shalenti, the Yanchato Lang Balveyala, Junyangale. And Tapilgun, Quam Pilimene, the Langu, be the Fong Guabo, be the Yerang Chende, Domine Doromanyala, Dwarshelden Lura. So the Pantamang Pam Cataju Bianbo. Kargal segare te samba ne yiwo dunyan cheka ate ugwa manfen yala kasukuto zan doromana te loga nta dan lam pahnyame te bin yara shihbo be te bin yara bwablebo de betune arinya bin sha'a ka shihra be ka chane in shihra bin yara domin doromana mal ya shamma sonu to malle ka kanati shihle ka bami ka kale ka kanati shihe ka doroma loga so te kpan te manfen yala pam kate balage te bin yara shebo de nya ja doroma beto chumte nangbina chuta te mine to kuto ku cheben sha kam shebo to amma ayen shebe an shebe shao akpan lama ka pa nu ven yala ngane chibo kumsaha na anu pa ma puna pa be anashara malben shaka to bonde hand sanitizer ka yusilam bobiel funna anu ne nannane odinya shi magba doroma karbato infiya nan gbuna na tatuma tuta fongwa ma pun yalle ba dizala talhazo o karku zeni shachan darbutu na chan be dizala talhana chan akpan la ma ajina samban puluka ni face mask silmi gambal men sha face mask kar limsire yin sal yemino nwelza akwan zang limsa yemina nwele de yanci ajina samban ne kabato vojula po ambiama del lampa anyan tim be ayan ko hamme akpan la ma silmi gambal ben sha akatbonde de tissue ka nyele mra ma de sa anyan tim anto tim nang da puni bi anto ko ham nang danne kazan nang bola puni be amben yeti shuma around bir ka tim tampun tim de shama banga man ka yusi akun pangushe tim de yan cheka duroma bato nye swale impia nang bana puni en no kula en partial nyama te chali at ninni yerang boble bo be ka bobla am shaha nyebe anwel be atable ka nu dai lama dan tonya la bolla duroma she pulu kazan marani ni ay nyama karadwel swelke so ta bilim hankal no kunye she lembala kam wona zanti ya mpuhe ya kapa ay shrub baby.
Saturday on Family Feud.
Hey, name a popular sport in Ghana. Rugby's on the board, and we've got some of the national team right here on Family Feud. Matusi is in the building. Name a language you are likely to hear in Accra.
Equipping.
The captain of dripping.
Girl, watch yourself. Mess around and get yourself a blesser. On TV3, yeah.
Family Feud every Saturday 9 p.m. and repeats Wednesdays 3 p.m. on TV3. Brought to you by Malta Guinness. Malta Guinness, fueling and celebrating Ghanaians for the past 30 years. Hashtag celebrate your own. Hashtag pull him up.
All right, welcome back to a roundtable conversation on the coronavirus pandemic in Ghana and what we've been doing so far to be able to contain the spread and also ensure that we are a better place to deal with the outbreak. If you just joined us, we started this conversation over the last 60 minutes, and Dr. Victor Bampo, former Deputy Minister of Health and Coordinator of Global Financing and Technical Support of UNAIDS is with us in studio, as well as Dr. Yabediako, immunologist and research fellow at the West African Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens at the University of Ghana, Legon. Also with us, Dr. Samuel Kaba is a consultant neurosurgeon and public health physician, director of the Institutional Care Division and head of Ghana Health Service COVID-19 case management team. Also, Dr. Amachewa Edwin is a physician, clinical psychologist, a bioethicist, and then also a palliative care clinician. She's a senior lecturer and head of department at the Psychological Medicine and Mental Health School of Medicine, University of Health and Allied Science in Ghana.
Please,
before we went for that break, Dr. Bampo, let me come to you now. The bit
Alfred, I need to correct something because my bio has changed and I sent the correct one. I am on a leave of absence from UHA, so I am not the head of department.
Okay.
I need to put it on record, please.
I know
I sent the correct one,
them,
so
yes.
please. I
So
am currently with the University of Ghana Medical Center. I need to put this on correct.
Thank you so much for this. I think it's extremely important that you put it on record so that your former employers don't call you back. You know,
not even that, but you're giving me a post. I'm not occupying.
Thank you so
much.
Dr. Bampo. Now, the bit on lessons, I think that's really another important thing that we should look at going forward. What lessons can we draw from past events related to this, and then also how other countries have also dealt with the situation as we've been confronted with now.
Thank you, Alfred. I'm a big fan of learning lessons, and unfortunately, it's not something that we're very keen on. And I'll take us through a little trip as well. So, in 1918, on the 31st of August 1918, a ship called the SS Shonga landed on the shores of Cape Coast. They had people on the ship that had the pandemic flu at that time. By the time the pandemic was over in Ghana, 100,000 people had died. 57, 68, there were also big outbreaks of influenza. Just coming, into the 20th and 21st centuries, we've also had SARS, which was also a coronavirus, so we've had MERS. Now, you would bear with me that if you travel to any of the, the Asian countries, before this pandemic started, you would find a lot of them wearing masks because they had learned from SARS. And one of the countries which has a celebrated response is Korea.
Yes.
Hong Kong has not done badly. Taiwan has done very well. Vietnam has done fantastic. Vietnam has done well because of the community aspect. But these other countries I've mentioned is because of the lessons they learned. What have we learned from when we had the pandemic influenza, so many years ago, 100 years ago? And even more recently, when I was deputy minister, we had to do the preps for Ebola. I worked very well with Dr. Kaba here. We were part of the EOC. And we had similar discussions about how we should make sure that we take the personal, hygiene protocol seriously, how we should make sure that communities are empowered. As soon as the Ebola issue went down, so did our enthusiasm to chase some of these things. And if there's anything at all that we can take away from this, it probably will be how we make sure that this time, not only the immediate steps we're talking about now, but the medium to long-term steps are put in place so that next time when there's another pandemic, we don't have issues. And what do I mean by that? I mean that when it comes to education, and we're talking about information versus education, we have the firefighting approach. When the issue comes, then quickly we want to get NCC, we want to get everybody in. But some of these things are learned over generations.
The NCC actually is yet to be giving money. The president mentioned that they are now going to give them money to do that. They had some funds and gave the district 100 CDs when we started, this whole education. So the Josephine Nkrumah was on our network, made the point that they don't have the money to do the education, even though, yes, there's been interventions from various organizations and agencies to help them to also do the education, especially at the local level. Yes. So, yeah, that's where we are.
So, for example, we're going to go into some of the things that we have to do to ensure that this does not happen. The last point I'll make is that we also need to take a holistic approach. When we look at what are some of the things that we can do, it is ironic that as this has happened, we're talking about, the president talked about hospitals, which are very good. 88 hospitals is very good, but we need to strengthen the parts of our health sector that we need the most for a pandemic like this. Right. Dr. Kaba was talking about contact tracing and so on. There are at least 3 strands of healthcare: promotive, preventive, curative. We should not overemphasize on the curative. These things take time, getting people who are trained in contact tracing, getting people who can do community entry and all that. Final thing I would say is that we also have examples of success. You may have been too young, but there was a time when we used to drive on the left.
74.
Yes. And we had to shift to the right-hand side. That was one of our brightest moments as a country, because that transition was done overnight without a single death. And it was because there was a concerted effort to inform, but more importantly, to educate people.
Right.
And nothing good comes easy. We cannot continue to have this firefighting approach where the issue comes and then we are scrambling. People put systems in place, and then when the issues come, they use those systems, and that's what we must learn.
Great point that you made there. Dr. Kaba, the bit about community ownership, I want us to hone on it a bit more before we move on to the next issue related to data-driven decisions going forward. There are concerns that in as much as, yes, the community has to own some of this, the approach in dealing with the spread of the pandemic, there's also that other challenge of the community also having a stance because of lack of education and fighting what some of the proposals that you're making that they have to own. So how do we scale over that hurdle as we're confronted with now for the communities to now see it as a responsibility themselves to help in curtailing the spread of the virus?
Yeah, all right, so I'm just going to pick it from where he left, because lessons learned is actually what you can build on into a better future. You do not get community ownership from one day.
Right.
It's also a build-on process. And probably that's what Dr. Victor tried to explain, where we need to build strong public health systems. It's not only, prevention is not only the better thing to do. It's the easiest and the cheapest, and it's always the smartest to do. But when you're going to do that, there are other parameters we need to start to look at. Every country on earth has its own culture. And even within the countries, within the same country, the culture varies. Korea did excellently well because they had a certain level of culture, even with technology.
Yeah.
So they were able to come out with these things, and then people could drive through, test. They get a WhatsApp that you are positive, you isolate yourself. Trust me, in Ghana here, if you send a text message to someone and say you are positive, that phone will never ring anymore.
Yes.
So you can't substitute those apps, I mean, the human being interaction with those apps in our society. Before we even got into what we are now, we call it democracy and all that, the African had his own way of manifesting and carrying his information. Information is power, and it's private. And that is what we have to change and make information of general knowledge. And that's why at WHO level we are talking about what? Solidarity in everything we do. So what happens is this. When I was growing up, back in my hometown, when there was no WhatsApp, there was nothing of those things we have today. The chief could pass information to all the houses through the elderlies, and we will comply. And I'm still seeing that now. You get to a treatment center, you get a case, you want to go pick up the case from the community, and the chief of that community, that small zongo, is the one to influence whether they will bring him out or he will not come out.
True.
You get to a border town. You see, you need to approach this thing segmentally and look at the best way to deal with it. COVID, one of the things I've seen is that we keep hitting the same information.
Yes.
When the disease pattern and everything is changing. And we're not changing our information. If you go back to my hometown, which I always make a joke, I say is the People Democratic Republic of Navrongo. Some few minutes walk, you get to Paga, you are into Burkina. We got only a small place where officially you can pass through. Way back, when Ebola was a threat to us, we went through the border towns, is it? I went through the border towns again to do the same inspection we did those days. And trust me, besides that side, here and there, people can enter anyhow. You need that ECOWAS approach. Because even in my first interview, before Ghana even hit one, I said, look, if Ghana locks down and our neighbors don't, you don't achieve much. And we in the border towns, we speak the same dialect. You can't tell me that I'm not from here or I'm not from there. And the information there should be packaged in a different form because the local people know exactly who is from here. And they know who walks in the night and who walks in the day. So I was very happy before this whole thing when government brought the religious people together and synthesize them. I knew that beyond the TV show, there were talks behind. And I'm very happy to see that Pentecost has given such a fantabulous place. Because if we hadn't that capacity of over 1,000, what will happen is that our health facilities would have been overwhelmed by now.
Yeah.
And this is another way of even calling for other religious bodies to come on board. And not to be even struggling with them as to whether we should open churches or not. Some of them have done so brilliantly well. And they are even the people to campaign and say, it is not yet time to even open the churches. So we need to change our whole tactics in the information. And we need to make it easily available. I was telling the community health nurses, if you come into Ghana Health Service, one of our strongest points is community health nurses, because they are with the community.
Yes.
And I say, look, if you package all the information for her to deliver to the community, you are only trying to enforce compliance. You won't get anything. You won't get. Or the police can say, stay at home, I'll whip you. That's okay. That's compliance. It's against my will. That's why people will say, let me come out and see whether he's actually there. But if you get them, they package the information, educate the people, and tell the people, this is the community there. You and you, today you're going to talk to us about COVID. They will definitely do some effort to research about COVID. All of a sudden, you've actually turned them into your ambassadors without knowing. But if you go and you keep talking to them and you keep giving them information, the best of what you might even think is that they are there. They are not even listening to you. They are there. So I like that bit we are all talking about. How do we re-strategize our messages? How do we get the community to own this process? And be the people to even come out and say, in my community, we have this person, we think he's sick. Let's take him to the hospital, right? Or they call, come for him. When he's okay, bring him back. We will be the people to receive him. We'll even make a gathering, receive him very nicely, clap for him. He is very much okay. And gradually we will surely go beyond these things.
Dr. Kaba, I mean, certainly these, you touched on the, excuse me, the restrictions on social gatherings, and so I'm going there. The president made the point that it cannot be a permanent part of our lives. What would you want to see the next 3 weeks that the president had extended these restrictions on social gatherings to convince you that it should be relaxed?
You know, I started by telling you that numbers matter very much, especially when you are dealing into something you don't even know where you're going to. If we keep increasing, right, and trust me, probably there is something I should have mentioned. When you break down the Ghana population, you see that the young ones in the majority of the other regions have moved to the cities in search of greener pastures.
Yes.
The cities in the villages, if I could say it that way, so that nobody will say, I'm a villager and I feel proud of that, but sometimes people don't want to, when you say, but back in our hometowns, the people there, their lifestyle is different, their age is different, everything is different. And when we start hitting there, it's not going to be something palatable. Two, we look at these risk groups. Let's say people who do long distance trips, right? If they don't have that, let me say, that ownership criteria or opinion or sense of ownership of the disease, and they even have it, they move from one place to the next. In Makola, every day is a market day. But elsewhere, it's every 2 days, every 3 days. If I have it, you won't see me in this market till the next 3 days.
Yeah.
And that is why I talk about the different components of our society and where you find yourself.
Right.
So, here's the point. There are norms and some criteria established by WHO as to how to ease your restrictions. One of them is that your capacity to test should never be overwhelmed. And I will explain capacity. Over the days, I've heard of this capacity to test. We are testing more. No, capacity to test is not only the ability to test, but the ability to give a result within 24 hours or maximum 48. We need to get that straight.
Well, but
if you do that, just a second, if you do that, you don't have a backlog.
Right.
If you do that, and after 1 week, you even take off the restrictions, you know very well that the cases you are getting are all active cases.
Real time.
That capacity, when you start to get to that level, which means all our regions should be able to test, not a sample traveling from Wa to Kumasi, that alone will take some days. You get what I mean?
Yes.
Then comes the next point, is that the number of people that will be infected, and I know they will be talking about that, right, should be less than 1 when you apply your R.
Should be less than 1.
Yeah.
They are not.
And that's, I don't want to be too scientific because
Yes.
when I'm engaged, I like people to understand.
Yeah.
Which technically means that the more people I test, those I had today, by tomorrow, when I do, the number I'll get should not be more than 30%, should not be more than 3%, should not be 2%, it should be less than 1. Then, the next thing is that your public health system should be able to detect, isolate, and your clinical component should be able to treat. So that at the end of the day, anyone you find new, you should be able to handle any case of that nature. But very important is that after that, you should be able to maintain that at any given time, any case you find, or you should have that power or that ability to detect any single case, or else you have a research and you might not even be able to deal with it. And you go back to the same thing we were working in. I would want to see the regions, right, settling. Let's all remember this, and I like what Dr. Victor said. We started from 2. Today, 5,000 plus. China started from 1. Spain, the same. Italy, the same. Greater Accra started with 2. If Bolgatanga started with 2, who is telling you that in the next 1 or 2 weeks, they will also be up?
So we're far from achieving these targets that WHO set. And 3 weeks is not enough to see us, attain these objectives to justify any reason to want to relax these restrictions. Dr. Bampo?
No, I just want to pick up from where Dr. Kaba left off and talk about the data, for example. And he was talking about the basic reproduction number, or the basic, which gives an indication of how many people an infected person can also pass the disease on to. The thing about this is that the raw numbers are fine, but the trends are more important. And what we do with the numbers, that is what is more important. So it is important for us to measure, to compare a calibrated entity that we know, time, against the numbers, and to try and tell a story about where we are going. So it also takes the focus of people away from the raw numbers. If, for example, we are told that yesterday we had so many and today we have so much, so that we know where we are going. That is and it is based on that we can then have some milestones to see whether our response is going well and whether we should change the way we are going. It's not helpful if we just have the raw numbers and we are not telling the story which will guide the decisions.
I see.
That's why I'm talking about a data-driven response.
And at what point do we get the balance between, okay, yes, this cannot be a permanent feature of our lives, but then the trends don't support easing restrictions when we get to May 31, as this restrictions on the public and social gatherings have been extended too. Now, at what point do we say, okay, yes, this is not going to be a part of our lives, but the data also shows otherwise, but we need to let people get back to their normal lives? How do we go about that? I ask this because of the decision to lift the lockdown, considering the economics and then also the science and the impact that the lockdown was having on businesses being one of the major reasons why we lifted the lockdown.
Yes, but now the social restrictions on social gatherings are still there. Dr. Kaba has described in detail the criteria we are to use. Dr. Bampo has talked about data-driven response. So response shouldn't be fixed at a certain point, saying that on 1st June we are going to lift it, or on 31st July. If all things being equal, by a stroke of miracle, we are there, why not? But if we are not there, what do you want? Is it just so that we said we were going to review it and left it at this point, or it is based on the data we have? And I think that is key. And throughout the president's briefings, he's talked about reviewing. So when you are reviewing something, when it is data-driven, you have the information, you have the data, you are looking at it, you are telling your story, and you need to come and tell us that based on what we are seeing, we may need to do this further, or based on what we are seeing, we are there. All I'm saying is that it shouldn't be cast in stone that come 31st, we are ready to lift the ban on social gathering. It shouldn't, that is not what should drive the decision. But if we can get the real-time test within 24 hours, maximum 48 hours, all the others, because the public health system test, we have, let's say, 1,000 people in a day. Where are we sending them? If Pentecost is full, UGMC where I work is full, Ghana East is full, people can't self-isolate at home, they need care. What do you do? So you are having the testing capacity, but your clinical response can't support that. What do you do? People are actually going to be more distressed. So these decisions must be taken carefully, and that is why the criteria they have talked about are things I support. Because if you come and you tell me that based on what we have, that we are not there, I know that it may be challenging, but you've also given us information.
Right.
You've given us information. That's the kind of thing, that's what leadership it's about. Even in your own home, sometimes your children, maybe you told them you're going to take them out to this place, but then you get an emergency, you have to transfer funds, use other things. You don't say that because I said I'll take you out, I'm going to borrow money and take you out to Busia to go and chill, or any place for that matter. You don't do that. That wouldn't be wise. What you would do is to have a conversation with the children and say, you know what, I said I was going to do this, but we had an emergency, you were aware of what happened, and because of that, I don't have the money to do that, but we will do it subsequently. We'll plan for it, and when we get there. So yes, you couldn't deliver on the day you said you would deliver, but you haven't taken hope away. All you are saying is that you may have to endure it a little more, and that is the place we need to come to as a nation. We shouldn't fix it in our minds that come 31st, the president should lift the lockdown. I miss going to church. I want to be in church, but I know that it is not wise to go in church. And he talked about leaders coming up and saying that this is not the time for us to meet, because you want to be able to worship freely, not worship under security. What kind of worship is that in terms of that? So these are the things we are talking about. The data should guide the decision. Let's interpret it well. I think I said earlier, and I'll say it again, we are looking so much on the fact that only a few people are dying comparatively. So it means we are doing so well. It may be so, but is it necessary what is happening? If that is what is happening, all well and good. But if that is not what is happening, we shouldn't look for the kind of information that will support the decision that we want and say that, oh, because we have only 22 and we have other people dying from all sorts of things, life should get back to normal. Do we know what will happen in a few days or a few weeks or a few months? This thing is here for the long haul, and we need to plan well. We need to prepare. Definitely, we will get to that point when these restrictions are restricted. But there's going to be a new norm. How we go to our places of worship, how we interact, even our funerals. Ghanaians love funerals. They are a huge business. So many people...
I was having an argument with somebody, and he makes the point that, yes, even though we're having restrictions on funerals now, after COVID, we will return back to normal because funerals are part of our culture. You need to get people to be at your funeral. So do you see this being a permanent part of our lives after COVID-19? I come to Dr. Kaba, but yes, I'll stay with you.
I remember that before the West Africa Ebola thing, 2014, 2015, ICGC, at least Christ Temple, during service, we shake people's hands. During benediction, we hold hands. During the Ebola time, we stopped holding hands in church, and to date, we do not. Where benediction says, hold it. Do you understand? That was the change that was necessitated by the Ebola. We didn't have Ebola in Ghana, but all these measures were in place. So we need to have new norms. That is that's what life is about. We are not static. Things are not casting. So what makes us think that we need to have funerals the same way we've been doing? People packed under the sun for so long. I mean,
people,
to what?
I'm thinking about your contribution and so on, and that's what they call it. I mean, Dr. Kaba, I wanted to chip in quickly, and then I'll come to Dr. Bediako on this. You wanted to make a point on this very quickly.
There is one thing I want us to understand here, that when we start talking of lockdown, it's a huge, massive decision to make. The type of lockdown you're talking of, partial or complete, we've been there before. I want to really extend gratitude to all those who actually complied that partial lockdown. But lockdown is about saving people's life, but also livelihood is very important. People also have to live their regular life and feel happy.
But then again, we still have to tick the boxes if we are thinking about returning to normal life. So I mean, I think that's where
a point here. I just want to, you see, we've learned some lessons. Korea didn't; they got through it for certain reasons. Just close by, Benin, they had a different system of lockdown, and those are the things that, as West Africa, we should be looking at. They didn't lock down the whole country; they locked down regions.
Yes. And I was actually going to get into that because 6 out of 13 regions that have recorded cases now account for about 97% of the cases. So should we be thinking about region-specific or area-specific restrictions as we go forward? Dr. Bediako.
I mean, just to go back slightly.
I know you wanted to make a point on
that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just talking about the data. I think I agree entirely with my colleagues here about we need to decide what it is we are working towards. Yes, we want life to go back to normal, but we want people to live. So at the end of the day, whatever needs to be done, and the President has said it, we cannot, I think his famous speech, his statement about we know how to bring back the economy, we don't know how to bring back people's lives. That is the bottom line. And so as much as it is difficult and we want to have our funerals, we want to have weddings, we want to go to church, the bottom line is we have to accept as a people, and I think it's expectations that need to be managed. The government and others need to begin to sensitize people that it's very likely that for a long time, life is not going to be normal. And there's nothing we can do about that. Nobody went and brought Corona to Ghana. Corona came. Or it came on a plane with a bunch of people. But it wasn't, the whole world is dealing with this. People are talking about post-Corona. When you want to travel, you might need to have a test, a certificate of immunity.
Yes.
Now we travel, we have a yellow fever card.
Yes.
Forget now yellow fever. There's going to be maybe a blue card or a green card. That will be your
corona free.
So life as we know it is going to change, and I think the way as a country we need to address this issue now is, I think everybody has said, focusing on the data, but you can't focus on something you don't have. So we've been talking about the fact that it is trends. I fully agree. It's not an absolute number. It is a number that is in a context. So if yesterday I tested 1,000 people and I got 200 positives, that's 20%. If today I test only 100 and I get 50 positives, you'll be like, oh, I've gone from 200 to 50. But in reality, I've gone from 20% to 50%. So we need to look at the numbers in context. It's not just number. It is number in context of time, but it's also in context of how much we are testing. With a disease like this where you cannot point to somebody and say you have it, many people will be asymptomatic, may have mild symptoms, may not be obvious to the eye. We only detect when we test. Now, Ghana has led Africa. Ghana leads Africa in testing. That's something we can be proud of. But it also means, since we know that if we don't test, we won't detect it, if we are not testing, if our capacity to test does not increase, the UK is talking about trying to do 100,000 tests a day. Ghana has done 160,000 tests over the past 6 years. Now, we are leading Africa, so we can be proud of ourselves. But countries are striving to do our number of tests in a single day. The reason they want to do that is they want to be able to calculate their R0 and their RE and be able to determine that truly it is either going up or it's going down. Like Dr. Kaba said, you cannot lift a lockdown if the people who are positive are still infecting other people. Then you're just saying all the money we've spent up to this point will be thrown away.
True.
But if we are to focus on the data, then we need the data. And the data is not just what you have on the screen, 5,200 cases, 6,000 cases. It is analysis of the data. We need epidemiological models. We need to show the curve, and then we can show, with mitigation, the curve is flattened. This is data that I believe we have the capacity in this country to generate. But for whatever reason, we are currently not generating. So I think as we begin to think about how to move forward, people need to understand this is going to be with us for a while. Till there's a vaccine, life is probably not going to be the same.
And
Deal with it.
That could take another 12 calendar months?
It could. I mean, as an immunologist, we've never developed a vaccine in less than, most vaccines take 10 years to develop. Everybody's trying to do this in 2 years. It's, HIV, we've been trying to get HIV vaccine for a long time. So it is a challenge. I believe that eventually we will get a vaccine. Ebola, they managed to get a vaccine. We hopefully will get a vaccine.
What's the shortest possible time you're looking at here?
I mean, probably 12 to 18 months.
12 to 18 months.
Yes. I mean, there are a couple of vaccines in trial. Currently, there are 115 vaccines or so that are being tested. I think there are 5 or 6 that are in phase 1 trials. 90% of vaccines fail. So if you have 115 and 90%, well, we have a few that might make it through to phase 2. So the whole world is working on this. It is a challenge. I believe that by God's grace, we will eventually get there. But we need to set our expectations. Let's begin to think it's not going to be overnight. 31st of May, the president is not going to, in my opinion, I'm not a prophet, but I don't, currently, if you look at the data as it is now, it's unlikely that things will change. So then we need to ask ourselves.
So you don't expect any easing of restrictions on social
based on the cases
now.
Right now, I don't see how. Yesterday we had 400. We had 400 cases between yesterday and today.
Yes.
We had 200 the previous day. So the numbers are, even if just raw numbers, even the raw numbers appear to be going up. If we put that in context of the number of tests, it may even tell an even more sort of cautionary tale. So I think what we need to ask ourselves is, how are we generating the data? What analysis do we need to do to be able to get a clear picture of what COVID in Ghana looks like? And then we can ask ourselves, all right, forecasting forward, COVID is going to be here for another few months. What do we need to do as a country to deal with it? So that it's not just enough to say where it's going to be here and people just figure it out. As a country, we can begin to see, are there things we can put in place to help people to, in order to pass through this difficult time as a country? So once we know what our data is, then we can have data-driven approaches to try to control the virus. And we can also have data-driven approaches to mitigate the negative social and economic impacts that it has on people. But it all starts with the data. So till I see on TV somebody show a very well-defined model of our data, till I see a curve, not just bars of absolute numbers.
I see. But Dr. Kaba is here, so I can pose that question to him. Why are we not having that data to help us understand, I mean, the likes of Dr. Bediako and Dr. Edwin and then Dr. Bampo understand the real picture of how we are, or what we are confronted with now?
All right, that is kind of like putting me on the spot. But I'm on the spot anyway. Yes. I won't be looking at this. All I want to say is this. We actually working on that, and I know that they know that we are now working on that. And we're looking, you see, because we have that approach of all hands on deck. And issues have come up. And as I say, COVID is so dynamic. No country has been able to get it at once. No one. And so we have to keep changing. And things have come up, and I think this is the best time for us to accept certain trends and really look at it. We've gone back to the drawing table. People are now working on that. statisticians are involved, and I hope that very soon we'll be able to, as a nation, we'll forge forward. But let me just say something.
Maybe in a minute, yes. I need to go for a quick break, yes.
One of the things I will be very happy, as we are talking about the new normal and all that, is that at least COVID has come to give us those conditions of what? Cleanliness. Because all these years, our huge issues about cholera is always because we don't wash our hands well. We are touching. So that is a good thing.
I agree. And I think the washing of hands habit should not be predicated on free water. Because it appears now, yes, we're telling people wash your hands because government has made water free. Beyond the 3 months of water being free, I think that information education has to go down well, that it's a habit that needs to be with us beyond the free water that we're having now. I'm going to go for this quick break. When I come back, we'll deal with what Dr. Bediako said. If this is the reality that we have to keep thinking about, how do we balance the science and the economics? After 3 weeks, if government, if the data doesn't convince anybody that we should ease restrictions. We'll be back shortly. To stay.
Assalamu alaikum. Nine Rafiatu Zakari, ASP Rafiatu Zakari, from Public Health Department daga Police Hospital. Yau mun zo da labari game da ciwon da ke gudana cikin garin ga. Shine batun coronavirus. Ku yi hankuri ku bar mu zama gida domin ciwon nan yana cikin unguwa yana spread. Esa in ka san kamar yadda da kan nan bai da amfani bai kawo maka wani abu. Yi hankuri ku bar mu kiyaye wasu mu stay gida. Mu saura gida. Na gode. Salamu alaikum.
Coronavirus.
Welcome back to our roundtable conversation on Ghana's fight to ensure that we are able to contain and deal with the spread of coronavirus in this country. We've gone beyond the 5,000 mark in just a few days. And that's indeed a source of concern. I've got lots of you sending your messages. I'll get into them shortly. Dr. Victor Bampo is with us. Dr. Ama Chirwa Edwin also is with us. Dr. Samuel Kaba is also with us. And then Dr. Yao Bediako is with us as well. I'll get into your messages a bit. But before we went for the break, Dr. Bampo, you wanted to make a quick point, and then I'll get into the testing strategy, because clearly, yes, we cannot test all 30 million Ghanaians, but there has to be a way of getting the asymptomatic persons walking around who may not even know that they have the virus. Yes.
No, I just wanted to support what Ia was saying, that life as we knew it is not going to be the same. Mm-hmm. So we should disabuse our minds of any view that we're just going to switch the light back on and everything is back to normal. That's number one. Number two, when we talk about the data-driven responses, I think we should also have in our minds that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Mm-hmm. So it's going to take a long time for us to get to where we will be comfortable. So this view of thinking that, okay, the president will come on the 31st and then he'll switch the light on or off. I think
because there was some expectation that on Sunday he was probably going to start the process of relaxing restrictions on social and public gatherings, because I think the week before he had given indications that he would roll out, that process. But have we convinced you? I mean, have you been convinced that
it comes back to the point about the story. I think all of us in our private capacities, we know that we have colleagues and so on who are working on these curves and all that. It's about telling the story to the majority of people and letting people understand to the best extent possible the decisions that go, or the data and whatever else that go into making the decision, so that you carry people along with you. So that it's not a question of, somebody else do the work. It should be a collective understanding of where we are that will then take us to where we want to be. So it's going to take a long time for us to get there. And one of the things that I think Dr. Kaba talked about, and he's going to go into the testing as well, this lockdown probably was not something that we didn't do well with it. Probably not for us. There are other countries that have
The lockdown is not for us.
Well, and let me explain.
Please.
What I'm saying is that he talked about Benin, he talked about Korea.
Right.
We have an largely asymptomatic epidemic. We have young people. We don't have robust health systems. So we should be chasing the virus, going into the communities, finding them actively, locking down the individuals who have the disease. So that is where we should move very quickly and be very aggressive. We cannot afford to lift the lockdown, take away the lockdown, and then be lackadaisical about actively chasing the disease in the community. So it's always a trade-off,
So there's no way in 3 weeks we can convince you, or you'll be convinced that there'll be a reason to ease restrictions so we get back to normal lives, as the president.
You see, the paradox is, well, the numbers are not convincing.
Because, yes, this cannot be a permanent feature of
the
our
numbers,
lives.
but the paradox is that we like to put ourselves on a pedestal, and that's where the challenge is. We are the best at this. We are doing the best of this. If the best comes with the best.
Yes.
So if we're the best, then we should then go back to normal. We should manage expectations.
Great.
You understand?
Great. And have we done well in doing that over the period?
I think it's a collective effort that we should. It comes with the education, the information, and the switching of the mindset that it's not as if, yes, we're doing very well with the testing, but that's not an end to it in itself. It's a means to an end. We've done, we're doing 4 per 1,000 or 4,000 per million or something. Second in Africa or first or whatever. Brilliant things that you've done at Legon with the pool testing and all that. But then that is just a signpost on the journey to recovery. So with that, what have we done? Final thing is that we should not make the excellent an enemy of the good. So it's going to be baby steps, one step at a time, and we're going to get there. It's not as if one day, and I think I've said this 3 times or 4 times, but it's because it's for emphasis. It's just not going to happen overnight.
It's not going to happen overnight. Let's not make excellence the enemy of the good. But Dr. Kaba, the bit about testing, because yes, we've all made the point that we have a largely asymptomatic population who may have the virus and don't know it. We cannot test the 30 million Ghanaians. But I go back to Obuasi. They decided to do voluntary testing, and they were able to detect 100 cases in 24 hours. How do you, the Ghana Health Service, intend to roll out a testing strategy that would help you identify the asymptomatic persons in our communities?
All right, so here's the point. There is a testing strategy, right? And it all depends on where you find yourself and what you want to achieve. There are moments that people come to the hospital and you test them very passively. What you are talking is doing active testing. But again, we learned so many lessons, as he rightly said. If you do active testing and you have a huge backlog, then it actually doesn't influence positively in your case management. Because by the time you detect those who were in the backlog, either one, they've recovered, or two, they've already spread the disease to so many people. So during the lockdown period, I was in charge of coordinating the testing.
Right.
And with the help of Professor Ampafo of Noguchi, we met and I told them, look, I'm not a laboratory scientist. I'm a neurosurgeon. You guys are the laboratory scientists. Tell me what you guys think we should be doing. Then I'll communicate to the minister. So together we came and we said, look, this is not one person's fight. We need to bring everyone on board. Private sector, standalone laboratories, laboratories in private hospitals, Ghana Health Service. We had some few things in there. At the time, it was Noguchi and KCCR who were testing. The veterinary services, and that was what, even the One Health concept came in. Because we are only looking at it from a medical point of view. But look, today, veterinary services here in Accra is testing. They are testing in Tamale. They are testing in Takoradi. So we came up, and we came out with this testing strategy where if we have some equipment, you might have heard it today, they were talking of gene experts that were actually brought in for TB. And things will come in very soon to make sure that if we get that, and the thing we should all understand is this, sometimes it takes a little time to get those things into the country. Because the country from which you're going to buy, they are also in a lockdown. Or probably they even need it more than you. I remember those days when we were talking about ventilators. I was one of those who said, look, prevention is better than cure. Calculating our human resource, calculating our equipment. At the same time, UK, they had closed down their factories from producing cars to producing ventilators. So if Ghana, you have even billions of dollars and you go, UK, give me ventilators. I need it for my people. So we look at those gene aspects to see how best around the country, all the regions, they can be testing on their own.
I see.
The second thing is to look at the involvement of the private sector, depending on situational analysis as to what they have and what they can actually afford to do. We've heard of the rapid diagnosis test. Professor Sampofo has been talking about it, that, look, people need to actually bring samples, like 300 of them for FDA to approve before. We've heard of that, so I won't walk into that. But Korea, their drive-through tests, they are actually PCR tests. And we are also working on all that. So when it comes, it will actually help the regions to be able to test faster and we get the results.
I say, at least if what the data is showing us anything to go by, we have 6 out of the 13 regions that have recorded cases, accounting for 97% of the total cases. Are you for the specific, region-specific measures? Or maybe we know the hotspots, so should we move into the specific hotspots to institute specific measures in these areas going forward, instead of a general measure that may not identify the specific areas?
As I said earlier on, COVID is something we have to keep learning from it. Those are not options off the table, if you were to ask me. Because, you see, one single case of COVID turns your public health upside down. Just like one single case of an emerging disease or re-emerging disease like Ebola. It turns your country the whole, and you have to make sure that you get those cases. Make sure you have 0 case. And the only way to do that sometimes is to take certain strong measures. But learning from when we did the lockdown, what were some of the challenges we faced? How would we reshare our food? How many days do we want to do it? What time would we get the results? So that if we locked a specific place down for even 3 days, we would have identified all the people who would call vulnerable people. We would have put in place, if we should get 1,000 out of that place, which facilities are they going to? These are lessons that we learn along, and these are things that we should be looking at before I can answer you that, look, I'll do this. But yes, those are all options for us to
on the table.
Evaluate.
You want to make a point?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to follow on from what Dr. Kaba is saying about targeted strategies. I mean, I think we are at the point where we have to acknowledge we have a problem. I think once you hit 5,000 cases, then you realize, okay, this thing is real, it is here. And I think we have to now think about leveraging all the resources at our disposal to drive our data-driven approach. So one thing in particular, I guess because I was involved in it, is interesting, is we have the capacity in Ghana to sequence the virus. We've done it already. We sequenced 15 isolates. We showed where they came from. It was obvious that there were some from Europe, some from America. What we need to do is now go back. So since then, we haven't sequenced again. But what I think one interesting thing would be to use sequencing to sort of drive our strategy. We have capacity in this country to sequence. We have people who can analyze that data. One thing we could do is track, if we want to know where the virus is going, you sequence the virus. So you know the virus is here, it looks like this. Over time, it will change. So if you find another variant that looks slightly different, you know that it moved from here to this location.
Right.
And so I know in Ghana we can develop sophisticated targeting strategies based on sophisticated science. So while we are doing the hand washing and the public health interventions, I believe Ghana can also lead in finding science-driven, high-tech solutions to our problem. Because
which you have been involved in.
Well, I've been involved in some. I won't take all the credit for it. But my point is we have that capacity in this country to be able to develop strategies that will take into account the unique challenges we have. A countrywide lockdown didn't quite work for us economically. Dr. Kaba is talking about targeted strategies. I think we should leverage our science to enhance that approach so that if I know that the virus has moved from community A to community B, then I know how I need to lock down. I can identify how it's moving, and I can target it. Maybe there's a trade route between the two places. Maybe there are goods that go from here to here. So then we can target those people for education and also for testing. And then when it begins to dwindle here, we can move elsewhere. That way, our limited resources are used efficiently. So my point is just, I think we perhaps go almost back to the drawing board. I would encourage, since I'm here, I would encourage the government to think about there's expertise in this country that is not necessarily in the forefront. There are lots of private enterprise. There are brilliant people in this country who perhaps we can tap into.
Right.
And I think what we need to do as a country is say, you know what, we want to lead in Africa. We like to win, right? So let's win but save lives. So let's think about solutions, not just low-hanging fruit solutions, but high-tech, sophisticated solutions that are driven by science and by the expertise that we have. So this is just one example. There are epidemiologists in this country. There are people who, data analysts and computational scientists. I think we need to begin to harness those people. At the same time, working with the everyday person on the street to understand the virus so that we come at it from both sides. Top-down, sophisticated, but also, if I do all my fancy science and then the market woman says, or show them me share mask, then all my sophisticated science for nothing. So I believe as Ghana, what we have never lacked is ingenuity, innovation, smarts. I think in general, we're a very intelligent, bright country. So let's use that. Let's set our goalposts a bit further.
Yeah.
And I think then we might be able to...
There's a question about low recovery rates, whether we should worry about that, because it's less than 10% now. Dr. Kaba, and then I'll come to you, Dr. Ademan.
Just to mention that some couple of weeks ago, I was in an activity where a brilliant chap, young guy, as we were talking, came to demonstrate an app about how to trace migration within Africa, and how they use it to trace movement of some people, and they got some disease somewhere.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think they are brilliant ideas. Yeah. Let me address this thing so that we all understand. Right.
And if you could make it snappy for me, have just 5 minutes. So.
All right. Yes. So the WHO has some standards. And it says that if you test positive, we keep you for 14 days. Then we do one test. If it's negative, the next day, 24 hours, we do the next test.
Okay.
That is good. What it simply means that everyone that we have, let's say the 500 and something cases we had, right? None of them will contribute to our recovery rate until minimum 16 to 17 days time, which by itself means that we need to be patient. You don't expect people to be, because until then if we do the test and one person is positive, that person will not contribute.
Okay.
But it's logic that in no time, maybe out of the 500, 200 will be recovered. Okay. That's the first thing.
So it's because of the multiple tests.
The next thing is that we have already gone into the society to talk about two negatives. For stigma purpose, it will be disastrous to come out and say, oh, you go into the society, you tested one negative, now go. Then people will still be like, okay, but you said we should be consistent. So all that delays. We've had cases in most of our treatment centers, even home care, where they test one negative, one positive, one negative, taking us to 30 days.
I see.
So, and just to make a
I'm
point,
not worried
is there
about
any
that.
country just doing just one test?
Well, you see, that's the thing. When I look at the figures, I really don't even pay much heed to the recovery rates. I look at the number of cases, the deaths, and so on, because there is no consistency. Countries are doing it differently. So when you try to compare, you may be comparing apples with oranges. The thing about it, our epidemic is that we have very few deaths. Every death is unfortunate, but we have very few deaths. And most of them are asymptomatic.
Dr. Edwin, you wanted to make a point, and then also you answer the question on some health personnel who have tested positive but are not part of those who are actually in direct contact with the patient, but also rather those who are the receiving end of the patients when they come in.
So the initial point I wanted to make is that we talked about the lockdown, but we never had a nationwide lockdown. We had a partial lockdown in Accra and its environs and Kumasi and its environs. And how was the compliance rate? So those are the issues we'll need to interrogate going forward, that if a directive is given, we understand we're doing it. But even the partial lockdown in these countries, in these parts, communities, were not adhered to, and that created serious problems. But let me come to my substantive issues. Yes, the healthcare workers that I know, and I've worked with some who are infected. So far, I stand corrected. I don't know anyone working in a treatment center who got infected. Ga East, I don't know anyone. Certainly UGMC, that is where I work. I would definitely know. I don't know about Pentecost and Rage, whether they are still doing that. Those who got infected were doing their regular jobs, working in their regular hospitals, and they got infected.
What could be the reason?
Because the majority of our population have asymptomatic or mild disease. So, you see, the very sick people, those with the severe, moderate to severe, are not going into regular hospitals, are calling or will be brought in by ambulance or something. But the ordinary looking guy, you and me, if I have it and I don't show symptoms, you wouldn't know, but I'm doing everything and you may catch it. So that is an issue. What do these facilities have? Ideally, if you are managing, and I'm speaking purely as a doctor here, if you are managing, treating any patient and there's a high index of suspicion for that this could be an infectious disease, there are measures. You treat as that condition until proven otherwise. So if you are managing a patient and you think that this is patient has probably contracted COVID-19, then you would go in and manage it as if that is it. But those again are easier because the high index of suspicion will be there. It's the regular people who may have it. You have an itchy throat. You go there and they test you and you are positive. It is how they work in the centers. A lot of them, you see, if you are in an isolation center, every eye is on you. You need a facility. But in the regular hospitals, if they are working, they are wearing surgical masks. Sometimes you may find yourself in doing a certain procedure that may generate aerosols, but you don't have all these things. So there are gaps. There are gaps. And I think that the need should also extend to the hospitals that are not really on the radar because they haven't been designated as centers for managing COVID-19. But we need to protect our healthcare workers, because if they do get infected, then you are going to lose critical manpower. You're going to lose critical manpower. So it's important that they get the needed support and equipment and whatever they need to be able to provide care for the people who haven't even been diagnosed.
Great point there. And on that very cautious note, I want to say thank you so much for being with us here on this all-important conversation. Government has a responsibility to keep all of us safe, but you also have that responsibility as an individual to keep safe yourself, and that's that clarion call that runs through all the proposals that my guests have made today, and the many suggestions as well to government, and of course to the Ghana Health Service, ably represented by Dr. Samuel Kaba, who is consultant neurosurgeon and public health physician, also director of institutional care division and head of the Ghana Health Service COVID-19 case management team. He brought a lot of perspective to what they are doing as well in this regard. I'd want to thank you so much for making the time to be with us. Also, Dr. Victor Bampo, former Deputy Minister of Health and Coordinator of Global Financing and Technical Support of UNAIDS. Doc, thank you so much for making the time to be with us. Also, Dr. Amachirwa Edwin is a physician and clinical psychologist with the University of Ghana Medical Center. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us as well. Dr. Yao Bediakon is an immunologist and research fellow at the West Africa Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens, University of Ghana, Legon. Thank you so much. And this is not the end of this conversation. And you know that as for this is the third in the series. We're going to continue having these progressive conversations here on TV3. We're also live on our various media journal platforms. My name is Alfred Okanse. On behalf of the rest of the team, thank you for watching and do have a good evening.
Ghana Revenue Authority Domestic Tax Revenue Division. Payment of withholding taxes. April 2020, all withholding tax agents to note. The Ghana Revenue Authority wishes to remind all withholding tax agents, including VAT withholding agents, appointed by the Commissioner General that withholding taxes must be paid to the Domestic Tax Revenue Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority by the 15th of every month. Withholding taxes for April 2020 will therefore be due by 15th May 2020. Withholding taxes, including withholding on VAT deducted from suppliers operating on VAT standard rate scheme 12.5%, employment, payment for the supply or use of goods, payment for the supply of any works, payment for the supply of services, and all other withheld taxes for April 2020 are due by 15th May 2020. Pay all withheld taxes by due date, and all payments should be made with an accompanying schedule in both hard and soft copies indicating gross amount, the tax deducted, and names of taxpayers from whom the taxes were withheld. Please note that failure to pay tax by due date attracts an interest of 125% of the statutory rate, compounded monthly on the outstanding tax. To contain the spread of the COVID-19, taxpayers can file their returns and other documents electronically by using the email addresses provided by their tax officers. Payment can also be made to the bank account of the Domestic Tax Revenue Division offices provided by the offices only. The GRA can be reached by email on info@gra.gov.gh, by WhatsApp on 055 299 0000 and 055 328 0229, or toll free on 0800 900 102. Commissioner General, www.gra.gov.gh, hashtag our taxes, our future.
This program is brought to you by
Cerelac, now with Iron Plus, big nutrition for small tummies.